Let's get right into it. Number 8. Seashell dental implants. Imagine you're a Mayan with a toothache back in 600 AD. You have a missing front tooth, and it's making it hard to eat. You go to the local dentist, who's basically just a guy with a hammer and a bunch of seashells. Modern people would run away screaming at this point, but for the Mayans, this horrifying procedure actually worked. Archaeologists in 1931 discovered a Mayan skull with something bizarre in its jaw. 3 of the front teeth had been replaced with pieces of seashell, expertly carved into the shape of teeth. At first, they thought the shells were just placed there for decoration after death, but a closer look revealed something incredible. The jawbone had grown around and fused with 2 of the seashell implants. This person had lived with their shell teeth for years. These ancient DIY dentists had accidentally discovered the principle of osseointegration, the process where bone fuses with an implant. Thousands of years before modern medicine, they'd take pieces of seashell, carve them to look like teeth, and then literally hammer them straight into the patient's jawbone. No anesthesia, no sterile operating room, just a rock, a shell, and a whole lot of courage. Scientists studying these ancient implants found that the shells were made mostly of calcium carbonate. That's a major component of our own bones and teeth. So when they hammered these shells in, the body's response was, "Oh, I recognize this material," and it began to grow right around it, locking the implant in place. Imagine getting a seashell hammered into your face without anything to numb the pain. The success rate probably wasn't great, but for the lucky ones who survived the initial hammering and didn't die of infection, they got a pretty decent and surprisingly long-lasting replacement tooth. These shell implants could last for many years, proving that sometimes the most brutal solutions are born from sheer desperation and a stroke of accidental genius. Number 7. Scraping your eyeballs. Imagine waking up one day and your vision is all cloudy, not like you need glasses, but like someone has glued a piece of wax paper over your eye. That's what having a pterygium feels like. It's a fleshy growth that creeps from the white of your eye onto the cornea, slowly blinding you. The ancient Egyptians had a solution for this, a horrifyingly direct solution. They'd take a small, sharpened copper tool and literally scrape the growth off of your eyeball. While you were awake, there was no anesthesia, just you, the doctor, and what probably felt like someone using your eye as a tiny, fleshy chalkboard. The truly insane part? It actually worked. The procedure was so effective that we still do basically the same thing today for pterygium removal, a procedure called a pterygium excision. The main difference is that now we have the luxury of anesthesia, sterile tools, and maybe not having the procedure performed next to a pile of mummified cats. The ancient Egyptians wrote about this treatment in the Ebers Papyrus, their medical textbook from 1550 BC. This means people have been scraping eyeballs for over 3,500 years. Archaeologists and medical historians studying these ancient techniques were shocked at how similar they are to current treatments. Some of these ancient eye doctors were apparently so skilled that they could perform this procedure in under 5 minutes. That's a good thing, because you probably wouldn't want someone grating your eyeball for much longer than that. Of course, the risk of infection was massive. Using a non-sterile copper scraper on the most sensitive organ in your body was a huge gamble, but when the alternative was guaranteed blindness, it was a gamble many were willing to take. Number 6. Starving the shakes. An ancient doctor sees a child shaking uncontrollably, their body convulsing in a seizure. They have no idea about neurology or brain chemistry. They try herbs, chants, and prayers, but nothing works. Then they try something desperate. They stop feeding the child. Their solution to seizures was basically, "Have you tried turning the food off and on again?" And it actually worked. When people with epilepsy were forced to fast, their seizures would often lessen or stop completely. Ancient physicians had no idea why. They just observed the connection. No food, no seizures. They had stumbled upon a powerful medical treatment by pure, desperate observation. Today, we call this the ketogenic diet. When you stop eating carbohydrates, your body runs out of its primary fuel, glucose. It panics and switches to its backup generator, burning fat for energy. This process creates molecules called ketones. When your brain runs on ketones instead of glucose, its entire chemical environment changes, making it much more resistant to the abnormal electrical storms that cause seizures. It's like switching your car from regular gas to high-performance diesel. Same engine, different fuel, and a much smoother ride. Modern doctors still use this exact principle to treat children with severe, drug-resistant epilepsy. Some studies show it can reduce seizures by up to 50% in half the kids who try it. But back then, they took it to the absolute extreme. They wouldn't just put kids on a special low-carb diet. They would make them starve for days on end. Ancient doctors would keep this up until the seizures stopped, or the patient simply became too weak to continue. It was a horrifying game of chicken between the epilepsy and starvation. Number 5. The deadly stomach soother. You're in ancient Rome, suffering from stomach cramps so agonizing you'd do anything for relief. The local healer hands you a cup of tea made from a certain plant, or maybe just a single tiny purple berry. This will help, they say. They fail to mention that this same plant is so toxic that Roman assassins used it to poison their targets. This is belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. Eating just a few of these enticingly sweet berries can cause paralysis and death. Yet for centuries, it was used as medicine. It was basically the ancient world's Pepto-Bismol, if Pepto-Bismol had a body count. The difference between a therapeutic dose and a fatal dose was terrifyingly small. A little too much, and your relaxing tea becomes your last meal. But in those tiny, precise doses, it worked wonders for stomach problems. The secret is a chemical called atropine. Atropine is a powerful muscle relaxant. It essentially tells the spasming muscles in your digestive tract to calm down. It's like sending your overactive stomach on a forced vacation. For someone doubled over in pain, the relief was almost immediate. But get the dose wrong, and things go south fast. Your mouth gets so dry it feels like you've been eating sand. Your heart starts racing, your vision blurs, and you begin to hallucinate. Too much atropine doesn't just relax your stomach. It tells your heart and lungs to take a permanent break. Those ancient healers had to be master chemists, figuring out the razor-thin line between a cure and a corpse. We still use purified atropine in modern medicine today, in everything from eye drops to emergency medications for heart attacks. Every ambulance carries it. Number 4. Animal tendon grafts. You're a Roman legionary who has just taken a sword to the forearm, severing a critical tendon. In the ancient world, that was a career-ending, life-altering injury. You'd lose the use of your hand forever, unless you were lucky enough to be treated by a visionary surgeon named Galen. Galen's solution was as gruesome as it was brilliant. He knew you needed a new tendon, so he would source one from another animal, like a dog or a goat. The donor material had to be fresh, so the poor animal was likely sacrificed on the spot. Your replacement part was coming straight from man's best friend, and Fido wasn't walking away from this surgery. Once Galen had his donor tendon, he would meticulously clean it and size it to fit your injury. Then, using silk thread or sutures made from animal gut, he would stitch the animal tendon into your hand, bridging the gap in your own severed tissue. Your only pain relief was a bottle of wine and something tough to bite down on. The incredible part is that it often worked. If the patient survived the surgery and avoided infection, the human body would accept this foreign animal tendon. Over time, the host's own cells would migrate into the animal tissue graft, slowly replacing it and remodeling it into a functional human tendon. It's a process called creeping substitution. Your body essentially says, well, this isn't mine, but I guess I can work with it, and rebuilds the foreign part in its own image. Many of Galen's patients regained significant function in their hands. His technique for tendon repair was so advanced that it remained the gold standard for surgery for over 1,500 years, largely unchanged until the 1900s. Number 3. The skull fracture lift. Imagine you're in ancient Rome and you've taken a rock to the head during a brawl. Your skull is dented like a dropped melon. You're suffering from blinding headaches, dizziness, and maybe seizures. This is a depressed skull fracture, and it's putting dangerous pressure on your brain. The local surgeon has a plan. First, he'd shave your head around the injury. Then, he would take out a drill and bore 2 small holes, known as trepanation holes, on either side of the dent in your skull. At this point, you're wide awake, probably held down by several strong assistants, listening to someone drill into your head. Next, the surgeon would take a metal hook or a piece of strong thread. They'd carefully slide this under the fractured piece of your skull, going in through one hole and coming out the other. Then, with a firm, steady pull, he would lift the depressed fragment of bone back into place, like popping out a dent in a car door. The relief from the pressure on the brain would have been almost instantaneous. This terrifying technique actually worked. Modern neurosurgeons still use a very similar method called an elevation for depressed skull fractures, though with sterile equipment and general anesthesia. Archaeologists have found numerous ancient skulls with healed fractures that show clear evidence of this procedure. These weren't just last-ditch efforts, they were successful surgeries. Some of these patients lived for many years, even decades, after having their skulls popped back into shape. Sometimes, the surgeons would leave the drill holes open, a practice called trepanation. They believed it helped bad spirits escape from the brain. While their reasoning was wrong, the result was accidentally beneficial. Leaving the holes open helped relieve swelling and intracranial pressure, increasing the patient's chance of survival. Number 2. The Sun-Powered Magnifier. You're in ancient Greece, face, and you have a nasty wart or a skin lesion that you want removed. The doctor doesn't pull out a knife. Instead, he pulls out what looks like a large curved piece of polished glass or metal. He's not going to just look at your wart. He's about to hit it with a death ray. The ancient Greeks, most notably Archimedes, understood the power of optics. They knew that if you take a curved lens or a polished concave mirror and angle it just right, you can focus the rays of the sun into a single, intensely hot point of light. It's the same principle you used as a kid to burn ants with a magnifying glass, but weaponized for medicine. The doctor would position you, angle the burning lens to catch the sunlight, and aim that tiny, searing point of light directly at the unwanted growth. The focused sunlight could reach temperatures hot enough to instantly burn tissue off your body. It's the ancient version of laser surgery. It would burn off a wart or skin tag, and the intense heat would cauterize the wound at the same time, sealing the blood vessels and reducing the risk of bleeding and infection. Modern scientists have tested replicas of these ancient burning lenses. They can easily reach temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. This wasn't just a party trick. It was a legitimate and effective surgical tool. The downsides were obvious. It only worked on sunny days. If you needed a wart removed during a cloudy week, you were out of luck, and there was no anesthesia. The patient had to lie perfectly still, while a concentrated beam of sunlight, hot enough to start a fire, was held against their skin. One wrong move, one flinch, and you'd have a fresh burn in the wrong place. Number 1. The facial sinus drill. Imagine a sinus infection so monumentally bad that it feels like your skull is in a vice grip. The pressure behind your eyes is so intense you can't think, you can't sleep, and you're in constant, throbbing agony. In this pre-antibiotic era, this chronic sinusitis could last for years, or the infection could spread to your brain and kill you. You're so desperate, the idea of someone drilling a hole in your face seems like a reasonable solution. This was a real procedure called trepanation of the frontal sinus. The doctor would take a hand-powered drill, called a trephine, place it on your forehead just above your eye, and start turning. You are fully conscious. You can hear the crunch of the bone as the drill slowly bores a hole right through your face and into your sinus cavity. The doctors knew the anatomy of the skull, mapping out the safe zones where they wouldn't accidentally drill into your brain or your eyeball. The moment the drill broke through the inner wall of the sinus, the magic happened. All that built up, infected pus and fluid that had been trapped for months would come pouring out. The relief from the excruciating pressure was immediate and profound. After years of pain, patients could suddenly breathe again. The headache was gone, and a shocking number of people survived this. Skulls from this period show clean, perfectly healed holes in the frontal sinus. These patients lived for many years after someone drilled a hole in their head with a hand crank. They did this without anesthesia, without antibiotics, and without any modern understanding of germ theory. Today, surgeons still perform procedures to drain infected sinuses, but they've refined the process. It's called endoscopic sinus surgery, and they use tiny cameras and instruments to go up through the nose instead of through the face, but the core principle remains identical to the one discovered by our terrified, desperate ancestors. Make a hole, drain the gunk, and relieve the pressure. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.